Okay, as promised, we're going to start wiring up our functionality, and we're going to start wiring this up for the happy path. I just wrote this comment for myself. We do have to handle the exception when we're trying to create a task to a project that is not found. But we'll take care of that in a later video. Right now, we're just going to focus on the happy path, and we have ways to go, so might as well get started. Okay, so in order to add a project task, we need to take two parameters. For now, this is going to change once we have security. We need to take two parameters. The first parameter is the project identifier. This is going to help us relate this to an existing backlog, and then obviously we need to take the project task object that we're trying to create. All right, so then once we have that, the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to try and locate that backlog, right? There's no sense in trying to persist or doing anything else if our backlog doesn't exist, and we're going to set up an exception for it, but for now we're going to assume that it does exist. Okay, perfect. So the second thing that we want to do is that we want to take that project task and we want to set it to the project task that we're going to create. We want to give it the backlog, set backlog, right? The backlog, once we find it, we're going to say, hey, here you go. This is the backlog that you belong to, right? Because we're passing obviously the identifier. And by the way, when we're doing this on React, you're going to see why we really want to have this here. Then we want to take care of our project sequence. Okay, so as you remember, and I just want to talk about this again, our project sequence for our backlog, each object starts at 0, and then it keeps on growing so that we can actually meet the use case that we explained in the last lecture. So the first thing I want to do is actually extract the current sequence on our backlog. And it's going to be backlog.getPT sequence, all right, which is again initialized to 0 and it's of type integer. Moving on, once we get the sequence, we want to increase the sequence by 1 each time we are trying to create it. Okay, so in this case, this is literally setting the sequence to 1. Okay, because we don't have ID 0, we want to start creating the sequence right away. Okay, so now that we have this in place, we want to update. Well, actually, just so that we're super careful, this is where we update the sequence. All right, so now that we have this in place, we want to add the sequence to the project task. Add sequence to project task. Okay, and here what we're going to do is we're going to say project task, which is the one that we're trying to create, set project sequence. It's right here, and we're going to set backlog get project identifier, right, which would be something like this, and then plus, and then we're going to do some string here, because remember this project sequence is a string, and then the backlog sequence. Okay, so in this context, this is basically what this is basically doing is ID pro 1. If that was the case, if that was what we were creating at that moment. Okay. And then we also want to set the project task identifier. This is going to help us with our path once we go back to React. I promise. I know that this is not making a lot of sense. Why do we want the project identifier on all the project, the backlog, and the project task? When we start building our URLs to perform the operations, we're going to need this. So we're just going to set, whatever identifier we're passing here, we're just going to set it there. And actually, we could literally use this one here. But since we are making sure that the backlog exists, I do want to grab it from there just to be on the safe side. Probably I should do the same thing here, but again, since we're gonna have an exception here, I'm not too worried. So it doesn't really matter. Well, the good thing here is that if I put this here from here, then I don't have to actually do a get operation from the DB, right? That should be better. That should be more efficient. Because if this doesn't exist, nothing else is going to happen. So then we can take this string here at face value. This is actually different from my code, I think, from my original code. But we'll see how that goes. No worries there. All right. Then the next step that we're going to take here is this use case. So if we don't set our priority when we're creating a project task, then we're going to automatically set this priority to priority 3. So basically priority 1 is going to be high, priority 3 is going to be low priority. So let's set the priority here. So if project task get priority is equal to 0, or project task get priority is equal to null, because remember this is if I remember correctly, the priority is integer type. Okay, if it's null, then we want to set project task set priority. We want to set it to 3. We want to set it to low priority. Okay, in the context of this, it's like, hey, if you don't even care to set up a priority for your task, then it's low priority. Because people that are concerned with medium and high priorities, they will set it up that way. Okay, so that's my logic there. Also, the initial status when it's null, if project task get status, if the get status is either blank or null, I think this one's going to be a long video because I do want to wire up the controller so we can try this out. If it's so, then it's going to be project task that set status. What am I doing? Sorry. Set status to do. All caps, okay? And actually, I could have used enums here. I don't want to overcomplicate things. I'm just going to leave it like this, but you could totally use enums. And I'm just throwing these little nuggets there to give you ideas of things that you can do on your own if you want to refactor or scale this this project. And then we're just going to get the project task repository, and we're going to save. Remember, it's out of the box with the correct repository, and we're going to save the project task. Okay, so I think at this point we have completed all of our use cases. We have actually complied with our requirements, and as you can see, this is a really big piece of code, and this is the reason why you don't want this on the controller, right? This is why you don't want to have these kind of things in the controller layer, okay? Because you want all your logic abstracted from the controller so that it becomes more maintainable for you. Okay, perfect. Now we're gonna create a project task controller, or well, since we're really working on the backlog here, it doesn't really matter what we name it. So I'm just gonna call it the backlog controller, because this is pretty much gonna be backlog operations, right? How we are updating our backlog. Okay, so our backlog controller, we're going to obviously set this up as a REST controller. We're going to do a request mapping of /API/backlog. And remember when we were trying to persist the first time from React that we got a cross-origin error? well, we're gonna set a cross origin so that we can make calls from our React app. And again, there's a whole lot more to this than just adding this annotation, right? Like right now, this is not really safe, right? There are ways to do it globally, and there are also ways to really lock down what can actually call our API. So I'm not too concerned about this because we're using a token, and the token is going to be generated in the server once we get there. So that's why I'm like, being a little relaxed with this. But this is something that you really have to look into if you're actually doing this on a production scale. Okay, a little coffee, and let's keep moving forward. Okay, so what we're gonna auto wire here, we're going to auto wire just a project task service for now. And you know what? I don't care how long this video gets. I am not going to stop the video until we are able to prove this use case. Just because I really don't want you guys to be like, okay, well, I hope it works in the next one. Unless we run into problems, then maybe we will just stop the video. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so now we're going to create our first action within this controller, and it's going to be a post mapping. Okay, because here we are using this to create a project task. Now this is going to take one parameter, which is going to be the backlog ID, which is in turn the project ID. Remember, those are the same, because we want to make sure that we persist our project task to an existing backlog. We're going to call this public, and it's going to return a response entity of type generic, because if you remember anything from the previous section, we want to make sure that we're getting a valid project object or project task object. Okay, so we're going to call this add project task to backlog. Okay, now what are we taking here? First of all, we need to take a valid request body. Okay, valid request body of type project task. So we need to have a valid project task if we're hoping to persist anything to the database. Then I'm going to make some room here. Obviously, since we're taking a valid one, then we want the binary result. Okay, so we can actually extract any validation errors that we might have. And then we're also going to take the path variable, which is going to be the string backlog ID. Actually, why don't I just make some more room here? Backlog ID. And remember, it literally has to be the same as here. Okay, so I might as well copy paste it here so that we are super clear. And with this, these are all the parameters that we're going to take right now: the backlog ID and the project task and the binary result. Cool. So then this is going to be pretty straightforward. And by the way, we need to bring another service. We need our map validation service, because remember in the last section we actually set this up for the future so we can reuse it. Okay, so if you remember in the project task, we do have some validation. This cannot be blank. So now we're gonna make sure that before we try and persist, we actually have a valid object. So again, response entity of type generic error map validation or map validation service dot map validation service, and we're gonna pass it the results. And then in 2 lines of code, if error map is not null, meaning we have errors in there, then we return it. And remember that in the last section we actually abstracted like 8 lines of code into 2 lines of code for the validation. And I think that this can be abstracted even further, because we're still repeating ourselves with this here. And that's another challenge for you folks. I took it from 8 to 2. I think we can still make this 1 line of code, but I'll leave that to you to figure out. Okay. Hey, where's the fun if you don't try things on your own? right? You don't want to be mindlessly following everything that I do and then just be stuck with everything that I can teach you. You also want to grow your skills. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is to create a project task here, because at that point we're going to call a project task service, and we're going to call the method that we created in there just a few moments ago. And then this one takes 2 parameters for now, which is going to be the backlog ID and then the project task that we're trying to persist. This is all going to be updated once we bring the user into the mix, but for now, this is what we're doing. And then we're going to return a new response entity, which is of type project task. So if we're successful, we're going to return the project task that we try to create, and then the HTTP status of created. Created. Perfect. And I think we're ready to roll. So I'm going to restart my server. And in our testing here, we first need to create a new project object. And I hope this works, because we've been doing a lot of coding without testing. And we have our project object. And then for this to work, we obviously need, first of all, we need to set the new route, which is a post. The path is going to be localhost 8080, which we already know. And it's going to be API, but instead of project, it's going to be backlog. And it needs the backlog identifier as a path variable here. Remember, that's what we're taking here. And then we need to pass it a valid project task object. And remember, it is considered valid when it at least contains the summary. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to body here. We're going to make sure that this is to application JSON. And then we're going to create an object that contains the attribute summary. Okay, and let me just make sure that we're doing that right. Yes, summary to a T. And then test. And if everything is working good, this should create our first project task. And internal server error. Let me see what went wrong. Null pointer exception. Interesting. Why is that? Okay, let's troubleshoot this together for a few minutes. If I get stuck, then I'll just stop the video and come back to you. Backlog controller, project task service, line 39. Project task service line 39 is saying. Okay, so it seems that it's not liking this, so I'm just gonna comment that for now. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna comment out of that and try again. So again, I restarted the server, so I need to create a new project object again. Grab the identifier and then try this again and see what happens. Right? We're passing up a valid project task. And there you have it. Perfect. So as you can see, we have our first project task. All right, it's starting on the right sequence. It is giving us default status. I don't know what happened with the priority there. I don't know why it didn't like it, but just because I haven't really looked into the problem, I just wanted to make sure that this worked. So go ahead and comment this out for now. Don't worry, we'll fix this. All right. So for now, just trust me, comment it out, and make sure that you can create this, and everything looks good, right? This is exactly what we want. Okay, and if we yeah, everything looks really good. This is the only thing that I don't understand why it crapped out on us. but don't worry, I'm pretty sure I can fix it. But this is really good. This is already a long video, so I'm gonna stop here. Then in the next video, I'm gonna take care of this issue, and then we're gonna keep moving forward with the rest of the CRUD operations that we need to perform. Thank you very much. Good work.